A simple Wi-Fi change leads to a 911 call, but the truth is far more shocking. Malcolm Hayes wasn't the kind of man who sought attention. In fact, he avoided it. He worked from home, kept his lawn trimmed, and only spoke to his neighbors when absolutely necessary. For the most part, people left him alone, and that's exactly how he liked it. But one small decision, something as simple as changing his Wi-Fi password, would suddenly put him under a microscope. It all started on a quiet Thursday afternoon in Fairview, Ohio. Malcolm had just wrapped up his morning's work and decided to take a short break. Lately, he had noticed something off about his Wi-Fi connection. It was running slower than usual. His video calls were lagging, music was buffering, and websites were taking longer to load. At first, he chalked it up to his internet provider being unreliable, but something about it didn't sit right with him. He had lived in his home for 3 years and never had issues this bad. So, he decided to dig a little deeper. Opening his router settings on his phone, Malcolm scanned the list of devices connected to his network. Most were expected: his phone, laptop, and TV. But there was one he didn't recognize. The name wasn't a random jumble of numbers and letters like most devices. It was labeled Fairview Net 01. Malcolm's stomach tightened. That was weird. He lived alone. He never gave out his Wi-Fi password, not even to neighbors. He wasn't the type to share his internet, nor did he have extra smart devices connected to his network. So, who was using his internet? Feeling uneasy, Malcolm decided to take action. With a few taps, he kicked every unknown device off his network and reset his password to something even stronger. He stepped outside to get a better signal while typing in the new credentials on his phone. And that's when Karen Whitman saw him. From her kitchen window, Karen spotted Malcolm standing in his driveway, staring at his phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, typing something. To her, it looked suspicious. Karen had never trusted Malcolm, not for any real reason, but simply because he kept to himself. Unlike most neighbors, he never joined block parties, never made small talk when collecting his mail, and never waved when passing by. And now, there he was, standing in the same spot for several minutes, messing with something on his phone. Her mind jumped to the worst possible conclusion. He was hacking. She didn't know what or why, but she felt it in her gut: something wasn't right. Before she could talk herself out of it, Karen grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Yes, I need to report something suspicious. My neighbor, he's outside doing something with his phone. I don't know what it is, but it looks off. Can you send someone to check it out? The dispatcher asked a few follow-up questions, but Karen didn't have any real answers. She just kept repeating the same thing: he's up to something. I just know it. Within minutes, a police unit was dispatched. And Malcolm? He had no idea his quiet afternoon was about to turn into a full-blown investigation. The sirens approaching. Malcolm had just finished updating his Wi-Fi password when he heard sirens in the distance. At first, he barely noticed them. Sirens weren't uncommon in the city. Maybe there was a traffic stop down the street or an emergency elsewhere. But then, he saw the squad car. It wasn't passing by. It was slowing down, and stopping right in front of his house. Malcolm's body tensed. 2 officers stepped out. One was Detective James Calloway, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor. His partner, Officer Rachel Simmons, was more compact but carried herself with an unmistakable air of quiet authority. Malcolm exhaled slowly. "Here we go." He stayed exactly where he was as the officers approached. Calloway's hand rested near his belt, not on his gun, but close enough to send a message. "Sir," Calloway called out, his voice calm but firm. "We got a call about some suspicious activity. Mind telling us what you're doing?" Malcolm frowned. "Suspicious activity?" He glanced between the officers, confused. He was standing in his own driveway, on his own property. "I'm changing my Wi-Fi password." His tone was steady, but his confusion was clear. Calloway exchanged a quick glance with Simmons before looking back at Malcolm. "Do you live here?" Malcolm almost laughed. What kind of question was that? His car was in the driveway. His name was on the mailbox. "Yeah," he said, crossing his arms. "I've lived here for 3 years." Before Calloway could respond, a voice cut through the air. "He's lying." Malcolm turned, and there she was. Karen Whitman stood on her porch, arms folded, watching everything unfold like she was the neighborhood security guard. "He's always outside doing something," she continued. "Messing with his phone. Looking around like he's watching people. Now he's been standing in the same spot for 10 minutes, just tapping away." Malcolm couldn't believe it. Was she serious? "I was in my router settings," he said flatly. "Because someone I don't know has been using my Wi-Fi." Karen scoffed. "Oh, sure. And I'm supposed to believe that?" Calloway turned to her. "Ma'am, do you have any evidence that Mr. Hayes has done something illegal?" Karen hesitated. Because of course she didn't. She just had a bad feeling. I don't know," she admitted. "I just think you should check." Calloway let out a slow exhale, his patience thinning. Then, turning back to Malcolm, he said, "Sir, would you mind if we take a quick look at your router settings? Just to clear this up." Malcolm clenched his jaw. He shouldn't have to prove anything. But he also knew how these situations could spiral out of control. He let out a slow breath and muttered, "Fine." Unlocking his phone, he pulled up his Wi-Fi settings. "Here. Take a look." Calloway leaned in, his eyes scanning the list of connected devices. Then, his expression changed. Because there it was. Fairview Net 01. His gaze sharpened. "Who owns that device?" Malcolm shook his head. "Not me." And that's when Officer Simmons noticed something else. "Look at the logs," she murmured. Her voice had shifted. This wasn't just about stolen Wi-Fi anymore. Something far more disturbing was happening. And they were about to uncover the truth. Detective James Calloway's hand hovered near his belt, not on his gun, but close enough to make a statement. His partner, Officer Rachel Simmons, stood beside him, scanning the scene with quiet authority. "Sir," Calloway called out, his voice even but firm. "We got a call about some suspicious activity. Mind telling us what you're doing?" Standing in his own driveway, Malcolm Hayes frowned, glancing between the officers. Suspicious activity? He was just changing his Wi-Fi password. I'm updating my router settings, Malcolm said, his tone calm but tinged with confusion. He knew how these situations could escalate if he wasn't careful. Calloway exchanged a quick glance with Simmons before asking, "Do you live here?" Malcolm almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. His car was in the driveway, his name was on the mailbox, and he had been living in this house for 3 years. "Yeah," he said, folding his arms across his chest. "I've lived here for 3 years." Before Calloway could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. "He's lying." Malcolm turned to see Karen Whitman standing on her porch, arms crossed, watching everything unfold like she was the neighborhood security guard. "He's always outside doing something," Karen continued, her voice laced with suspicion. "Messing with his phone, looking around like he's watching people. And now he's just been standing in the same spot for 10 minutes, tapping away." Malcolm stared at her in disbelief. Was she serious? "I was in my router settings," he said, his voice level but firm. "Because someone I don't know has been using my Wi-Fi." Karen scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, sure. And I'm supposed to believe that?" Calloway turned to her, his patience wearing thin. "Ma'am, do you have any actual evidence that Mr. Hayes has done something illegal?" Karen hesitated. Because, of course, she didn't. All she had was a bad feeling. I don't know," she admitted, shifting uncomfortably. "I just think you should check." Calloway exhaled, glancing back at Malcolm. "Sir, would you mind if we take a quick look at your router settings? Just to clear this up." Malcolm clenched his jaw. He shouldn't have to prove anything. But he also knew how fast situations like this could spiral out of control. "Fine," he muttered, unlocking his phone and pulling up his router settings. "Here. Take a look." Calloway leaned in, his sharp eyes scanning the list of connected devices. And then, his expression changed. Because there it was. Fairview Net 01. His posture stiffened. "Who owns that device?" Calloway asked, his voice sharper now. Malcolm shook his head. "Not me." Officer Simmons stepped closer, her eyebrows raised. "So someone's been using your Wi-Fi without permission?" Malcolm nodded. "And I don't think they were just stealing internet. Look at the connection logs, it's been running non-stop. Someone's been watching." A shift rippled through the air. This was no longer just a petty neighbor dispute. Karen, who had been so sure she was in the right, suddenly looked uncomfortable. "Wait," she said, her voice quieter now. "What do you mean? Watching?" Malcolm turned to her, his eyes cold. "I mean someone has been spying." He let the words sink in before adding, "and they might be watching all of us." Silence settled over the front yard. Karen's confidence evaporated. Spying? That wasn't what she expected to hear. Detective Calloway straightened up, his expression now serious. "All right," he said, his tone sharper than before. "Let's get inside. I want to see exactly what we're dealing with." Malcolm didn't argue. He turned and led the officers into his house, his frustration simmering just beneath the surface. He hadn't done anything wrong, and yet, here he was, being treated like a suspect in his own home. Karen hesitated before following. She wasn't sure why, but something in her gut told her she needed to hear this. Inside the house, the truth begins to unravel. Malcolm placed his phone on the dining table, then mirrored his router settings onto his laptop screen. The full list of connected devices appeared. And there it was again. Fairview Net 01. Still connected. Still active. Officer Simmons leaned in, her expression tightening. Can you see what kind of device this is? Malcolm clicked through the settings, his fingers moving fast. I can't tell exactly, but... He trailed off, his face suddenly going pale. Calloway noticed the shift in his expression. What is it? Malcolm swallowed hard. It's been accessing camera feeds. The room went dead silent. Karen blinked. I don't understand. What camera feeds? Malcolm's hands trembled slightly as he turned his laptop around. Mine, he said. On the screen, a live feed from his home security cameras flickered. Malcolm's stomach dropped. Someone has been logging into my security system and watching my live feeds. Simmons' jaw tightened. You're telling me someone has been spying on you through your own cameras? Malcolm exhaled sharply. That's exactly what I'm saying. But then, his heart stopped. Because as he scrolled through the logs, he realized something far worse. It wasn't just his cameras. His system had flagged multiple IP addresses, some belonging to his network, but others. They were from different homes. Malcolm's breath hitched. Oh, this is bad, he murmured. Calloway leaned closer. What do you mean? Malcolm tapped the screen, his voice tight. Whoever this is, they're not just watching me. They're watching other people in the neighborhood. Karen staggered backward, her face draining of color. No. No, that can't be right. Malcolm turned to her. You sure about that? He clicked into another log. A new camera feed opened. A dimly lit hallway. A living room. A bedroom. Karen gasped. Wait, that's... Malcolm didn't even have to ask. He recognized it immediately. It was her house. She stumbled backward, pressing a hand to her mouth. Calloway's voice was sharp. How the hell is this happening? Malcolm's hands curled into fists. If I had to guess, someone in the neighborhood set up a fake Wi-Fi network. People connect to it without knowing, and once they do, their devices get compromised. Simmons' face darkened. You mean a man-in-the-middle attack? Malcolm nodded, his voice grave. Exactly. Karen's voice shook. You're saying someone's been watching me? My family? Malcolm met her eyes. That's exactly what I'm saying. And the worst part? The person responsible was a lot closer than they thought. Karen Whitman hesitated before stepping inside Malcolm Hayes' house. She wasn't sure why. Just moments ago, she had been so certain that she was doing the right thing, calling the police on him. But now, a sinking feeling gnawed at her. Something wasn't right. Once inside, Malcolm placed his phone on the dining table and mirrored his router settings onto his laptop screen. The device list appeared. And there it was again. Fairview Net 01. Still connected. Still active. Officer Rachel Simmons leaned in, her sharp eyes scanning the details. "Can you see what kind of device this is?" she asked. Malcolm clicked through the settings, his fingers moving fast. "I can't tell exactly, but..." He trailed off. His body stiffened. Detective James Calloway noticed the shift in his expression. "What is it?" Malcolm's throat went dry. "It's been accessing camera feeds." The room went dead silent. Karen blinked. I don't understand." "What camera feeds?" Malcolm's fingers hovered over the keyboard before he turned the laptop around. The screen flickered with live security footage. "Mine," Malcolm said grimly. The live feed from his home security cameras played in real time. Officer Simmons' expression hardened. "You're telling me someone has been spying on you, through your own security system?" Malcolm exhaled sharply. "That's exactly what I'm saying." But then, his stomach dropped. Because the more he scrolled, the worse it got. The system had flagged multiple IP addresses, some belonging to his network, but others. They were from different homes. Malcolm's breath hitched. "Oh, this is bad," he muttered. Calloway leaned closer. "What do you mean?" Malcolm tapped the screen, his voice tense. "Whoever this is, they're not just watching me. They're watching other people in the neighborhood." Karen took a shaky step back, shaking her head in disbelief. No, that can't be right." Malcolm turned to her, his cold stare unflinching. "You sure about that?" He clicked into another log. A new camera feed opened. A dimly lit hallway. A living room. A bedroom. Karen gasped, her body going stiff. "Wait, that's..." Malcolm didn't even have to ask. He recognized it immediately. It was her house. She stumbled backward, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. Detective Calloway's voice was sharp. "How the hell is this happening?" Malcolm clenched his jaw, gritting his teeth. "If I had to guess, someone in the neighborhood set up a fake Wi-Fi network, a signal that looks like a normal connection. People unknowingly connect to it, and once they do, their devices get compromised." Simmons' face darkened. "You mean a man-in-the-middle attack?" Malcolm nodded. "Exactly." Karen's voice shook. "You're saying someone's been watching me? My family?" Malcolm didn't look away. "That's exactly what I'm saying." Karen sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "Oh my God." Calloway's jaw tightened. "All right, we need to figure out who's behind this, and fast." But what none of them knew was that the person responsible was a lot closer than they thought. Tracking the source, a disturbing discovery. Detective Calloway wasted no time. He pulled out his radio and called for cybercrime support. "This is bigger than we thought," he muttered to Simmons. "If someone's running a surveillance network, they're not just invading privacy, they're committing a felony." Simmons nodded, her expression serious. "And if we don't stop them now, Who knows how far they've already gone? Malcolm, still seated at his laptop, was already digging deeper. He wasn't a hacker, but he knew enough about network security to trace the data flow. He opened the IP logs and he froze. Something wasn't right. Calloway looked up. What is it? Malcolm turned his laptop so they could see. His voice was tight. The data, it's not being sent to some random server. Simmons frowned. Then where is it going? Malcolm's fingers moved fast, cross-referencing the timestamps with the signal strength. And then, his stomach dropped. His face went pale. Calloway leaned in. Hayes, where is it going? Malcolm swallowed hard. Then, he turned the laptop toward them. It's being sent to an address, right here in the neighborhood. A long pause. Karen's eyes widened. You mean, someone close by is behind this? Malcolm nodded. His voice was low and sharp. It's coming from a house, just a few doors down. Calloway's expression darkened. Can you pinpoint exactly which one? Malcolm worked fast, running the data through network triangulation. Within minutes, he had a match. His blood ran cold. He recognized the address. Karen did too. She froze. Her voice was barely a whisper. No. Malcolm cut her off. His voice was icy cold. That's Tyler's house. Karen's face went deathly pale. No. No, that wasn't possible. Tyler Whitman. Her own nephew. The 22-year-old college student who had moved in with her just a few months ago. Quiet. Always on his computer. Barely socialized. And now, suddenly everything made sense. Karen's knees felt weak. No, that doesn't make any sense. Tyler wouldn't, he couldn't. Officer Simmons stepped in. We need to talk to him, now. Karen hesitated. She didn't want to believe it. But deep down, something in her gut told her it was true. Her voice was shaky. I'll take you to him. Malcolm stood up. I'm coming too. Calloway shot him a sharp look. No. You stay here. Let us handle this. Malcolm clenched his jaw. He hated sitting back, especially when he was the one who uncovered everything. But he also knew pushing back wouldn't help. He let out a slow breath. Fine, he muttered. But you'd better get the truth out of him. Because something told him. The truth was about to be a lot worse than any of them imagined. Malcolm Hayes wasn't a hacker, but he knew enough about network security to trace the data flow. His fingers moved rapidly over the keyboard as he accessed the IP logs. And then, he froze. Something wasn't right. Detective James Calloway caught the shift in his expression. What is it? Malcolm turned the laptop screen toward them, his voice tight with disbelief. The data, it's not going to some random server. Calloway and Officer Rachel Simmons leaned in. Then where is it going? Simmons asked. Malcolm's stomach twisted as he said the words. It's being sent to an address right here in the neighborhood. Karen Whitman's eyes widened. You mean, someone close by is behind this? Malcolm nodded, his jaw clenched. It's coming from a house, just a few doors down. A tense silence settled over the room. Calloway's expression darkened. Can you pinpoint exactly which one? Malcolm worked fast, cross-referencing timestamps and signal strength. Within minutes, he had a match. His stomach dropped. He recognized the address. Karen did too. Her face went pale as she whispered, "No." But Malcolm cut her off, his voice cold and steady. It's Tyler's house. Karen felt like the floor had just been pulled from under her. Tyler Whitman. Her own nephew. A 22-year-old college student who had moved in with her a few months ago. Quiet. Always on his computer. Kept to himself. And now, suddenly, everything made sense. Her voice shook. No, that doesn't make any sense. Tyler isn't, he wouldn't. Simmons cut in. We need to talk to him. Now. Karen hesitated. She didn't want to believe it. But deep down, a voice in her gut whispered the truth. I'll take you to him, she murmured. Malcolm stood abruptly. I'm coming too. Calloway's sharp gaze locked onto him. No. You stay here. Let us handle this. Malcolm's fists clenched, his jaw tightening. He hated sitting back when he was the one who had uncovered everything. But he also knew that pushing back wouldn't help. His voice was low. Fine. But you'd better get the truth out of him. Because something told him. The truth was about to be a lot worse than any of them imagined. Underscore 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 underscore. The knock on the door. Karen's hands shook as she led Calloway and Simmons down the street toward her house. Every step felt heavier than the last. Tyler. The kid she had taken in. The boy she had helped through school. It couldn't be him. And yet. A voice in her head whispered, what if it is? They reached the front door. Karen's breath hitched as she reached for the knob. Her voice wavered. Tyler, can you come downstairs for a minute? Silence. Calloway exchanged a look with Simmons before stepping inside. We're going up, he said. Karen didn't argue. She just wrapped her arms around herself, her breath unsteady. They climbed the stairs, reaching Tyler's bedroom door. It was shut. No sound inside. Calloway knocked hard. Tyler, this is the police. We need to talk. Still nothing. Then, movement. A chair scraping. Footsteps. Simmons' hand hovered over her gun. Open the door. Now. Slowly. The knob turned. The door creaked open. And there he was. Tyler Whitman. His eyes darted between Calloway, Simmons, and his aunt. His hands fidgeted at his sides. His voice was tight. "What's going on?" Calloway studied him. "We have reason to believe you've been accessing private security cameras in the neighborhood. You want to explain that?" For a split second, Tyler's face didn't move. Then, his fingers curled slightly, like he was gripping something invisible. "What? That's crazy," he scoffed. "I don't know what you're talking about." Simmons wasn't buying it. "Mind if we check your laptop?" Tyler's jaw tightened. "You don't have a warrant." Calloway stepped closer. "We can get one. But right now, we're giving you a chance to tell us the truth before this gets worse." A tense silence stretched between them. Then, finally, Tyler exhaled. His voice dropped. "Look." He ran a hand through his hair. "I wasn't doing anything illegal, okay?" Calloway's eyes narrowed. "Then why is your IP address linked to a network breach involving multiple homes?" Karen's breath caught in her throat. Tyler's eyes darted to her. And for the first time, his mask cracked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Tyler, please tell me you're not involved in this." Tyler hesitated. Then, he nodded. Karen staggered back. "Oh my God." Tyler kept talking, his voice faster now. "It started as a joke. I wanted to see if I could get into someone's Wi-Fi, just to mess with them." Calloway's voice was sharp. "So you admit you hacked into the network?" Tyler hesitated, then nodded again. Karen felt sick. Tyler kept going, his voice rushed. "It was just supposed to be a prank. But then I saw the security cameras, and I got curious." Simmons' eyes darkened. "Curious? Or obsessed?" Tyler's lips parted. But he didn't answer. Calloway had heard enough. "How many people have you been watching?" Silence. Then, Tyler's voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know." Karen covered her mouth, her body trembling. Calloway's patience ran out. "Tyler Whitman, you're under arrest for unauthorized access of a computer network and unlawful surveillance." Tyler's face drained of color. "Wait, no, I..." Simmons was already pulling out the cuffs. Karen turned away, tears well in her eyes. Malcolm had been right all along. And the worst part? She had called the cops on him, when the real danger had been inside her house the whole time. A long, tense silence filled the air. Tyler Whitman exhaled sharply, running a shaky hand through his hair. "Look," he muttered. "I wasn't doing anything illegal, okay? I just..." Detective James Calloway cut him off, his voice sharp. "Then why is your IP address linked to a network breach involving multiple homes?" Tyler froze. Karen Whitman's voice broke as she whispered, "Tyler, please, tell me you're not involved in this." Her nephew turned to her, and for the first time, his mask cracked. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." Karen staggered backward. "What do you mean?" What did you do? Tyler's eyes darted to the floor, guilt etched into his face. It started as a joke. I just wanted to see if I could get into someone's Wi-Fi, just to mess with them. Calloway's voice was like steel. So you admit you hacked into the network? Tyler hesitated. Then, he nodded. Karen's breath caught in her throat. Tyler kept going, his voice faster now. It was supposed to be a prank. But then, I saw the security cameras. And I got curious. Officer Rachel Simmons' eyes narrowed. Curious? Or obsessed? Tyler didn't answer. Calloway's patience was gone. How many people have you been watching? Silence. Then, Tyler's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't know. Karen stumbled back, shaking her head. Oh my God. For the first time, Tyler looked at her. And for the first time, she saw real regret on his face. I swear, I wasn't hurting anyone, he said, his voice pleading. I just. Calloway didn't let him finish. Tyler Whitman, you are under arrest for unauthorized access of a computer network and unlawful surveillance. Tyler's face drained of color. Wait, no, But Simmons was already pulling out her cuffs. His wrists were bound before he could say another word. Karen turned away, covering her face as tears welled in her eyes. Malcolm had been right all along. And the worst part? She had called the cops on him. While the real danger had been inside her own home this entire time. The aftermath, a lesson learned too late. Tyler didn't resist. He stood there, staring at the floor, as Calloway read him his rights. It was over. Karen's breath was shaky. She couldn't even look at him. This was her nephew. The boy she had taken in, fed, supported. And he had been violating the privacy of their entire neighborhood. Calloway guided Tyler toward the door. But before stepping out, he turned to Malcolm, who had been watching from the sidewalk. His voice was firm but respectful. You were right, Calloway admitted. If you hadn't caught this, we might have never known. Malcolm didn't say anything at first. He let out a slow breath, looking between Tyler and Karen. Then, finally, he spoke. You know what's crazy? His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. I was out here, minding my business, changing my own Wi-Fi password, and somehow, I'm the one who got the cops called on me. Karen flinched. She had no defense. Because there was none. Her voice was small. I was wrong. She swallowed hard. I made an assumption. And it was completely unfair. Malcolm let that sit in the air for a moment. Then, shaking his head, he turned toward his house. I don't need an apology, he said over his shoulder. Just do better. And with that, he went inside. A mistake that would haunt her forever. Calloway and Simmons exchanged a look before leading Tyler to the patrol car. Karen stayed behind. She stood alone, in the middle of the street. The truth had been right in front of her all along. But she had been too busy looking at the wrong person. And that mistake. It would haunt her for a long, long time. The lesson we should all remember. Assumptions have consequences. Jumping to conclusions based on bias or paranoia can ruin innocent people's lives, while the real danger goes unchecked. Instead of judging without evidence, take a step back. Observe. Listen. Because the truth, it might not be what you expect. The story of Malcolm Hayes and Karen Whitman is a powerful reminder of the dangers of assumptions, the importance of privacy, and the consequences of misplaced suspicion. In today's world, where technology connects nearly every aspect of our lives, we often take security for granted, until it's compromised. Malcolm was simply protecting his own network, yet his quiet and reserved nature made him a target for suspicion. Karen, on the other hand, made the critical mistake of assuming guilt without evidence, leading to an unnecessary police intervention. Her bias and paranoia blinded her, causing her to see Malcolm as a threat while the real danger was right inside her own home. This story highlights how fear and prejudice can cloud judgment. Karen never had a real reason to suspect Malcolm, she just didn't trust him because he kept to himself. This kind of thinking is dangerous, as it often targets the wrong people while allowing actual wrongdoing to slip through the cracks. Had she paused to gather facts before calling the police, she might have saved herself the embarrassment and guilt of accusing an innocent man while ignoring the true perpetrator, her own nephew, Tyler. It's a stark reminder that jumping to conclusions without evidence can lead to harm, mistrust, and even injustice. Moreover, the story underscores the importance of digital security and awareness. Tyler's crime didn't involve traditional burglary or physical threats. It was a digital invasion of privacy, something that many people don't take seriously enough. He manipulated technology to spy on his neighbors, violating their trust and safety. This is a wake-up call to be mindful of cybersecurity threats, monitor our networks, and take proactive steps to protect personal information. If Malcolm hadn't been vigilant, Tyler's actions might have continued unnoticed, with more innocent families becoming victims. Perhaps the biggest lesson comes from Malcolm's response. Despite being falsely accused, despite having the police called on him for doing nothing wrong, he didn't lash out. Instead, he confronted Karen with calm, irrefutable truth, that he was unfairly judged, yet he was the one who exposed the real danger. His parting words, "I don't need an apology, just do better," carry immense weight. They serve as a reminder that personal growth and change are more valuable than empty apologies. Karen will have to live with the shame of her mistake, but she also has the opportunity to learn from it and change her perspective going forward. At its core, this story teaches us to question our biases, think critically, and value the truth over assumptions. It warns us about the real dangers of cybercrime and urges us to take privacy and security seriously. And most importantly, it encourages us to judge people based on facts, not fear, prejudice, or speculation. Because in the end, the truth will always come out, whether we're ready for it or not.